Hi there, Rebecca Koffler here with Censored But Not Silenced, and I'm gonna give you a intelligence update on U.S. President Donald Trump's recent efforts to settle the Russia-Ukraine conflict, which was one of the top campaign promises for him. Well, regretfully, the president continues to dig himself deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole that is the Russia Ukraine conflict, which indicates to me that he is having some really faulty advice from his team, the Russia experts. It is not clear who is advising the president on this issue, because we have observed a pretty much 180-degree turn in terms of his policy. When he was coming in to start his second term, his decision was no more foreign wars, no foreign entanglements, no spending any more of U.S. taxpayers' money on those foreign wars. But recently, it's been exactly the opposite. He has authorized the provision of intelligence sharing to the Ukrainians, and he seems to be more and more committed to solve the Russia-Ukraine war, to end it, which is unsolvable and it's unwinnable. And I have explained why in my previous briefings. Well, the reason is that President Trump, just 2 days ago, approved his first weapons package to Ukraine, right? So until 2 days ago, all of the funding that the United States was flowing to Ukraine, both in cash and in military hardware, all of the assistance has been approved previously by the Biden administration. This was the first package that President Trump has approved under a new financial mechanism that the Pentagon has worked out, called the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List. Okay, and so there are two packages, actually, 500 million each of shipments of munitions to Ukraine that include air defense systems to protect the Ukrainian airspace from relentless Russian and missile and drones attacks. And so that's what's going on. Now, obviously, we are all hurting as far as Ukrainians are being slaughtered. President Trump wants to end this war, but the problem is that it's unsolvable because Putin is not going to stop this war. And from the combat potential standpoint, Russia has positioned itself, thanks to Putin, having transitioned on a wartime footing 7 years prior to the invasion on February 24th, 2022. So Russia is positioned for a protracted multi-year war. We have already provided 350 billion, between that and 500 billion, depending on how you count, because there are a lot of operational costs and intangibles that some analysts count and some don't. So it could be all the way up to 500 billion, right? for the unwinnable war out of the U.S. taxpayers' money. And the second problem with that is that we have depleted our own weapons arsenal to very dangerous levels. So, the second problem is this. Just today, President Trump met with the UK Prime Minister Starmer, and they spoke about ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and President Trump mentioned again the sanctions. The problem with the sanctions is that no, the sanctions are not going to end the conflict either. That is because, again, Putin sanction-proofed his economy. That's number one. Number two is that the economic concerns and security concerns are two different things for Putin. So it appears as though the thinking on Trump's team, or whoever is advising him, is that if we sanction China and India, because there's nothing to sanction when it comes to Russia, right? The trade is so minuscule between Russia and the United States. So you have to really sanction Russia and India and China, and that has already been done, and that did not change the decision calculus of Narendra Modi and Xi Jinping. They're still going to continue, they are continuing to buy Russian oil because they have their own economic needs, and they couldn't care less about Ukrainians and Russians dying because they have their own national interests and economic interests, and that's the priority for them. Now, part of the problem is that the Europeans are actually buying oil from Russia. Slovakia, Hungary, Turkey is buying, a NATO member, oil from Russia. Some other Europeans. So how can you possibly demand tariffs and sanctions on China and India while you yourself continue to buy Russian oil? It's just basically exposing the hypocrisy of the Europeans, and it's just exposing the actual reason why the Europeans are continuing to fund the war in Ukraine, because they're not willing to sacrifice their own comforts. You know, they need to be warm in winter, right? So they want to be comfortable. So what they really are using Ukraine for is a human shield. The Ukrainians, they want to prolong this war so that to prevent Putin, to deter Putin from invading a NATO country. That is another fallacy. Putin, there's no intelligence substantiating that assessment that Putin would invade a NATO country because he's not suicidal. Invading a NATO country would trigger Article 5 collective defense. Putin does not want that. He doesn't want to fight a direct war with NATO. And so that's the ultimate thinking, right? The Europeans are thinking that by prolonging the war, they will erode Russia's combat potential and deplete its weapons arsenal. Well, the truth is that Russia's weapons arsenal is so much larger than entire Europe's. In 3 months, Russia produces more military hardware than the Europeans produce in the entire year, the entire Europe. Okay, so so that's that, and then the thinking that underpins that whole sanctions theory, that somehow tariffs and sanctions are going to compel Putin to end the war, is deeply flawed. Whoever is advising President Trump on that is incompetent. Whoever that person is, they don't understand how the Russian warfighting machine works, how the Putin's regime decision calculus is works, how Putin formulates his decision. So here's what President Trump said during today's press conference with Starmer. And I'm going to quote for you. If the price of oil comes down, Putin is going to drop out. He's going to have no choice, Trump said. I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia. And he means the Europeans. Okay, so the assertion that Putin is going to drop out when the price of oil comes down is deeply flawed. It's just wrong. That's just not how the Russians think. How do we know this? Because we actually have some critical thinking skills. I went back and I tracked down the price of oil during Russia's previous wars and invasions, and there's absolutely zero correlation between the price of oil and Russia's decision to initiate combat operations pursuing Russia's national interests. There's zero correlation. Okay, I'm gonna write a whole nother. I'm gonna try to do a separate podcast on that, and I'm gonna write a piece on that if anybody would publish it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of censorship right now in the U.S. information space because the powers that be do not want to hear the truth. They just want something very simplistic, you know. Ukraine is good, Russia is bad, Ukraine is gonna win the war, give Zelensky some more money, and that's the end of discussion, right? But what I went back and I tracked down the oil price, so all I'm gonna say is that based on my intelligence analysis, there's zero correlation, and it just confirmed my initial preliminary analysis based on just my basic understanding of how Putin's mindsets work, right? Which, I mean, there's a reason why I wrote the book, Putin's Playbook, in which I predicted Russia's invasion of Ukraine a year before it happened. So, but that research and analysis confirmed that President Trump's plan or his assertion or whoever's advising him, their assessment that's going to make Putin stop the war is wrong. So I'm just going to throw it out, the data point for you on oil prices leading up and during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Okay? 1979, $25.1 per barrel, growing to $37, $35. And then the price collapsed. In 1982, it was 31. Then in 86, $14, $18. Okay. Now, for there needs to be some adjustments made for inflation, but the prices were low In fact, in 86, it was at the lowest point, 14.44 US dollars per barrel, which is, if adjusted for inflation, it's $42.48. Lowest point. Okay? And actually, when the Soviets withdrew, it was a little bit higher from the lowest point. It was at $18.33. Okay, so there's absolutely no correlation. Why is that? It's because the Russian economy has never been like super strong. Certainly not as strong as the U.S. economy or European economy. It's just a very different kind of economy. The Soviet economy was based on state control. It was a Soviet system based on socialism, right? But regardless, the Soviet Union and Russia have fielded the military and the weaponry that was second only to that of the United States throughout its history. And even today, the Russian military and military hardware is considered to be a near-peer competitor by the Pentagon itself. Okay? Because the Russian approach to manufacturing weapon systems is completely different. They're not after all the bells and whistles. Their weapons may not be like as accurate, but they do the job. Okay? So the terrorists in the Middle East are running around with AK-47s. They're not running around with AR-15s, okay? Why is that? Because it's cheaper. Why does India buy Russian armaments? Because they're cheaper than U.S. armaments. It's very simple. So someone needs to tell the president that it's not, and he's just digging himself into a rabbit hole. And the longer this goes on, right, let's say he does those sanctions that are going to do nothing in terms of stopping the war, and then what? And so that's just, it just doesn't look good when President Trump keeps saying things, that giving him these ultimatums, giving him deadlines, and then Putin goes and then invites him to Alaska, and then Putin goes ahead and does what he wants. It just doesn't, but besides, I'm not even thinking about the optics here. I'm thinking about all of the time and the resources invested in this issue when that could be spent here at home, especially considering the fact that the Europeans are not putting their money where their mouth is, or rather they don't want to inconvenience themselves assuming they believe, that would end the war, even though my analysis is that it won't end the war. But still, the fact that they believe that would end the war, those sanctions, and yet they don't do it, that exposes the true motives. So I'm going to end it here. Rebecca Koffler was censored but not silenced. I'm a strategic military intelligence analyst and a best-selling author of Putin's Playbook. Please follow me on social media. My handle is @Rebecca0132. I'm on X, Getter, True Social, Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll catch you later.